A space station turned slow against the dark. 30,000 souls. One window facing the cold. Move closer. Past the gleaming halls, where nobles in shimmering armor stride like the floor was made for them. Down. Down through the decks, no one thanks. Into a maintenance bay that smells of solvent and old metal. A man kneels there. Grease worked deep into his hands. He fixes the things that break and asks for nothing. He has spent 10 long years making his life small, safe, quiet. He does not know that 3 decks above him sits a box, a sealed prison, ancient, beautiful, cruel. 43 heroes have tried to open it. 43 have failed. And somewhere inside that box, in 4,000 years of darkness, a woman is waiting. Not for a champion, not for a sword, for someone who simply looks closely enough. Footsteps stop behind him. The temperature changes, and a voice says, "Mechanic, we need you." Part 1. The grease under Bram Holloway's fingernails had been there so long he'd stopped noticing it. 43 years old. Maybe 44. He'd lost track somewhere between star systems, somewhere between the colony ships and the mining outposts, and the long, quiet stretches of black, where one cycle bled into the next. It didn't matter. Age was a number for people who had somewhere to be. Bram had a waste recycler to fix. He stood in the cargo bay of Halcyon 9, wiping his hands on a rag that was dirtier than his skin, watching the nobles go by. And they were something to watch. Shimmering armor. Capes that caught the light like spilled oil. Faces sculpted by good breeding and better surgeons. They walked through the station the way water walks downhill. Like the path had been made for them. Like the floor itself was honored to be stepped on. Not one of them looked at him, which was fine. Which was honestly the way Bram preferred it. Because when people looked at you, they wanted things. And Bram had spent a long time arranging his life so that nobody wanted anything from him that he couldn't fix with a wrench. He turned back to the recycler, heard the footsteps stop behind him, felt the temperature of the room change. Mechanic Holloway. Bram didn't turn around. He knew the voice. Everyone on Halcyon 9 knew the voice. It belonged to Korvath, the station administrator, a Draxian the size of a cargo door, with 4 eyes, and a temper folded so deep most people never saw the bottom of it. "If you're here about the recycler on Deck 7, Bram said. "I already know. It's backing up. I'm on it." The recycler functions adequately. That made Bram turn around. Because Korvath never came down here. The administrator lived 3 decks up behind glass, where the air smelled like authority, and the chairs were built for important spines. He did not descend into the maintenance bay. He did not stand in the smell of solvent and old metal. Except now he was doing exactly that. And his face, what Bram could read of a Draxian face, which wasn't much, looked like a man who had run out of better ideas. Then what, Bram said slowly, is more important than a sewage flood on 3 decks? The princess. Bram waited. The word just sat there. Heavy. Useless. "I'm a mechanic," he finally said. "I don't do princesses." Korvath's mandibles clicked. A dry, papery sound. "You have heard of the ethereal vault. Of course, Bram had heard of it. Everyone had. For 3 cycles now, it had been the only thing anyone on the station talked about. The vault sat in the diplomatic hall. A cube, smooth as still water. Built by the old builders, a civilization so ancient and so brilliant that the modern galaxy still studied their garbage and called it genius. And locked inside that cube was Princess Alara of the Lyrian Empire. "They put a person in a box," Bram said. "On purpose. It is a test." Korvath's voice was flat. "Imperial tradition. The princess remains sealed until a champion proves worthy of freeing her. The one who opens the vault claims a great reward. And nobody's opened it. 43 have tried. 43. Bram let the number turn over in his head. 43 warriors. 43 legends. Heroes with names that echoed across sectors with weapons that cost more than the station Bram stood in. They came, Korvath continued, with plasma cutters, with molecular blades forged in dying stars, with weapons that have ended wars. A long pause. 43 came. 43 failed. Their weapons shattered. Their pride did not survive the trip home. And the princess is still in the box. The princess is still in the box. Bram picked up a hydro wrench, looked at it, set it down. He did this when he was thinking. His hands liked to be busy even when his head wasn't ready. "So you've got the best warriors in the galaxy lined up around the block," he said. "And you came all the way down here, to the maintenance bay, to talk to me." "Yes." "Why?" And here it was, the thing Korvath had walked 3 decks to say. Bram watched the administrator's scales ripple a Draxian tell, discomfort moving across the body like wind across grass. "Because the High Council has suggested," Korvath said carefully, "that an unconventional approach may be required." Bram laughed. He couldn't help it. It came out short and rough. "Unconventional? You mean somebody too stupid to know it's impossible?" "I mean," Korvath said, "someone who thinks differently. Humans are known for it. Your problem solving is crude, strange, occasionally effective. Occasionally. It is the kindest word I had available." And Bram almost smiled at that. Almost. Because there was something honest in it. And Bram had a soft spot for honesty the size of a moon. But he shook his head anyway. "Find another guy." "There is no other guy." "Then find another box." Korvath stepped closer. And when a Draxian steps closer, the room gets smaller around it. "The Lyrian Empire," the administrator said quietly, "is not a patient empire. If the princess dies in that vault, they will not call it tragedy. They will call it negligence. By the coalition. By this station." His 4 eyes held Bram steady. "By me." And there it was, not a threat. Worse than a threat. A man asking for help and hating that he had to. Bram knew that feeling. He'd worn it himself a long time ago, on a transport called the Wanderer, when something broke that he couldn't fix, and a friend paid the price. He didn't think about the Wanderer. He had spent 10 cycles not thinking about the Wanderer. But the not thinking lived in him anyway, like the grease under his nails. Always there. Just stopped noticing. Bram looked at the wrench, looked at the recycler, looked at the door. "Fine," he said. but I'm bringing my tools. The diplomatic hall was built to host the future of nations. Now it hosted a graveyard. Bram stood in the doorway and just looked, because the hall told the whole story without saying a word. Scorch marks blackened the floor tiles where plasma had been turned on the vault, and the plasma had lost. The walls were cracked in long, ugly seams where battering rams had recoiled into them, and scattered everywhere, like the bones of something proud, were fragments of broken weapons. Exotic alloys, star-forged edges, snapped, bent, dead. The smell of the room was ozone and failure. Bram knew that smell. It clung to a place where men had given everything and gotten nothing. In the center of it all sat the vault. And the vault was beautiful. He hated that it was beautiful. 3 meters to a side, smooth as a held breath, made of a material that reflected light without ever looking like a mirror. The geometry of it seemed to shift when he stared too long, like it didn't want to be understood, like it enjoyed that. Behind him a crowd had gathered. Word travels fast on a station, and the word was that the maintenance man was going to embarrass himself. Bram could hear the wagers being placed. He could feel the smiles. Let them smile. He set his tool bag down, knelt, ran one bare hand along the bottom edge of the vault. Cold, smooth, and then there, a seam. A single hairline seam running the perimeter of one face. No handle, no keyhole, no panel, no glyph, no glowing console begging to be solved. Just a seam, and 4,000 cycles of silence. A figure stepped out of the crowd. Tall, armored. 4 arms, each one holding a different weapon, and a carapace that gleamed like polished silver. Bram knew him. Daxon, a Keltarian knight. Bram had fixed the man's landing gear 2 cycles back. Mechanic. Daxon's voice was not unkind. That made it worse. I mean, no disrespect, but I struck this vault with a disruptor blade forged in a collapsing star. The blade shattered. A pause. What do you intend to do with hand tools? Bram didn't look up. I'm hoping, he said. The vault wasn't built to stop a guy with a wrench. Another voice. Higher. Stranger. Like wind moving through glass. The old builders were masters of defensive design. Bram turned. The speaker was Prisme 9, a being made entirely of living crystal light, bending through her body and scattering into soft rainbows on the scorched floor. A scholar. He could tell by the way she said defensive design, like the words were a meal. Their locks, she chimed, respond to quantum signatures, dimensional keys, energy credentials no longer known to any living archive. Without the proper key, this vault is by every theoretical model impossible to open. Bram nodded slowly. Theoretical, he said. That's my favorite word. Why? Because it means somebody's guessing. He pulled out his scanner, an old one, older than the apprentice who'd sold it to him. He ran it along the seam, and it told him nothing. No energy reading, no frequency, no pulse, no field, no lock. The vault was just there, existing, refusing, and the crowd began to murmur. That low, disappointed sound, the sound of an audience realizing the show is going to be sad instead of funny. Bram sat back on his heels, and he let his mind wander. Because that was the trick. That was the only trick he had ever really owned. When a problem refused to be solved, you stopped solving it. You let your hands rest and your head drift, and you thought about other broken things. All the broken things, every stuck and rusted and seized up thing you'd ever coaxed back to life. The cargo door on Outpost 12, rusted shut for a decade. 6 hours of penetrating oil and patience. The environmental seal he'd patched once with chewing gum and wire insulation. The water filter on the Wanderer number, not the Wanderer. The cargo door. Stay with the cargo door. Rusted shut. Rusted Bram stopped. He looked at the seam again. Really looked. Leaned in until his nose was a hand's width from the vault. Pulled the small light from his belt and held it at an angle, low the way you do when you want a surface to confess its secrets. And the surface confessed. Bram started laughing. It wasn't loud, but in that silent graveyard of a room, it landed like a dropped tray. "Mechanic Holloway," Corvath's voice cut across the hall. "What is amusing?" Bram stood, brushed the dust off his knees. "Question," he said. "How long has this vault been here?" Prisme 9 answered, light flickering through her. Station records indicate the vault was recovered from a derelict builder vessel. Approximately 4,000 cycles ago. It has been studied since. Never opened. 4,000 cycles. Bram nodded. And, in 4,000 cycles, has anyone, ever, done basic maintenance on it? The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Daxon's mandibles worked soundless. "Maintenance," the knight finally said, like the word was foreign, like he was tasting a fruit he didn't trust. Bram knelt again, tapped the seam with one knuckle. A dull, dead sound. "This isn't a quantum lock," he said. "It isn't an energy seal. It isn't a dimensional anything." He looked up at them. At all of them. At 43 legends worth of broken weapons scattered across the floor. "This is corrosion. The seam is oxidized. The door is rusted shut." The crowd erupted. Prisme 9 floated forward her crystal body, pulsing with something close to a fence. "Impossible. Builder alloys do not corrode. They are immune to entropy. It is the first thing every scholar learns." "Then either," Bram said, "your scholars were wrong, or this box has spent 4,000 cycles sitting in air. It was never built to breathe." He shrugged. "Either way, I've seen this exact problem 100 times. Different scale. Same sickness." And he reached into his bag. His hand went past the wrenches, past the screwdrivers, past the ancient scanner, down to the bottom, to the thing that had traveled with him across 3 star systems and never once let him down. A can, blue and yellow. The label faded almost to nothing, but the letters still legible if you knew how to read Old Earth Standard. WD-40. Bram shook it, heard the little ball rattle inside that small, familiar music. Corvath stared. "What is that?" "Penetrating lubricant." Bram aimed the thin red nozzle at the seam. "Humans have been using this since before we left our own planet. It frees stuck bolts. It quiets screaming hinges. It convinces metal to forgive itself." He glanced up. "Stand back. It smells like a decision you'll regret." He pressed the nozzle. The hiss filled the diplomatic hall, that sharp, oily, unmistakable sound. Bram worked the nozzle slowly around the entire perimeter of the door, patient, thorough, missing nothing. The smell rolled out across the hall. Petroleum, sharp and low and deeply stubbornly human. The aliens recoiled like he'd released something alive. What? Prismate 9 managed her surface-clouding gray is that odor that Bram said is the smell of human ingenuity. He kept spraying. Or human stubbornness. I've honestly never been able to tell them apart. He finished the circuit, set the can down, and then he did the hardest thing in the whole job. Nothing. He waited, because penetrating oil cannot be rushed. It is a slow argument. It needs time to seep into the microscopic gaps, to break the grip of 4,000 cycles of rust, to whisper to the metal that movement is still aloha. You cannot hurry it. Bram had learned that the hard way, the way he'd learned everything that ever stuck. The crowd waited with him. They didn't know what they were waiting for. They thought he'd lost his mind. He could feel it. The pity, the embarrassment, the slow, comfortable settling of, I knew he'd fail. 5 minutes. Bram stood, brushed his knees again, walked to the vault, placed both hands flat against the cold, smooth face, and pushed. Nothing. Somebody in the crowd laughed. Bram didn't turn around. He shifted his grip, set his feet, pushed harder. Nothing. He could feel it now. The weight of every expectation in the room pressing down on his back. 43 legends had failed here, and now the maintenance man would join them, and the station would have its story, and Bram would go back to the recyclers and the quiet. Except, Bram stopped pushing and pulled. The vault door moved. There was no light, no music. No ancient mechanism singing awake. The door simply slid sideways, with a low, gritty groan. The exact sound of any old door that has not been opened in far too long. Stale air breathed out of the dark. 4,000 cycles old, carrying ozone and dust, and underneath it, faint and impossible. Something floral. The diplomatic hall went absolutely silent. Bram looked inside. The vault was smaller within than its size suggested, barely room to stand. And on a plain bench against the back wall sat a young woman. Princess Alara. She rose slowly, as though she did not entirely trust the floor. Her skin held a faint light of its own, shifting between blue and silver, soft as the inside of a shell. Her eyes were large and gold, with pupils that narrowed against the sudden brightness. Her hair drifted around her head, as though she were underwater, deep purple, threaded through with white. She looked at the broken weapons on the floor, at the scorched walls, at the crowd of nobles staring with their mouths open. And then she looked at Bram, at the grease on his hands, at the faded can hanging from his fingers. When she spoke, her voice was music with an edge of pure disbelief. You opened it. Yeah. Bram cleared his throat. Door was stuck. She stepped out of the vault. Careful. One foot, then the other. The crowd did not breathe. 43 champions, she said softly, attempted my rescue. 43 heroes, with legendary weapons, with ancient arts. Her gold eyes returned to the can in his hand. And I am freed. by a man with a spray can. Bram tossed the can once, caught it. "To be fair," he said, "it's a really good spray can." And Princess Alara laughed. It started small. A breath. A surprised sound, like she'd forgotten she owned it. And then it grew real and bright and helpless, rolling out across that ruined hall and bouncing off the cracked walls, and Bram, covered in grease, holding his ridiculous can, standing in the wreckage of 43 legends, found himself grinning like a fool. He didn't know yet what that laugh would cost him. He just knew it was the best sound he'd heard in 10 cycles. They gave her quarters. They gave her guards she didn't want. They sent word to her father's empire that the Lyrian princess was free, and the station settled into a strange, buzzing excitement, the kind that comes when something impossible has just happened, and nobody is sure what to do with the after. Bram tried to go back to the recyclers. He got as far as the corridor before she found him. "Mechanic Holloway." He stopped, turned. She had changed out of the starlight robes into something simpler, gray and soft, but it didn't help. You couldn't hide what she was. It came off her like warmth off a coil. "You can call me Bram," he said. "Holloway makes me feel like I'm in trouble." Bram. She tried it, seemed to approve. "I would like to speak with you, if you are willing." He thought about the recyclers. He thought about 10 cycles of quiet and the careful, narrow life he'd built like a man building a wall. "I can spare an hour," he said. The observation lounge curved along the station's outer hull, one long window holding back the whole of space. Stars scattered across the black like salt thrown on a dark table. A nebula bloomed in the far distance, slow and purple, painting the dark with colors that didn't have names. Bram came here sometimes, alone, with a sandwich, to watch the universe turn and remember he was small. Now he stood beside a princess. For a while, neither of them said anything. And Bram, who had spent his life around people who couldn't stand a silence, noticed that she could. She just stood at the glass and let the quiet be. He liked her a little for that. He decided not to examine why. "Do you know," she finally said, "why I was placed in that vault?" "Figured it was politics." He shrugged. "Royal families. Complicated. It was a test." Her voice stayed level, but something underneath it had gone tight. "My father believes his children must earn the right to rule. My eldest brother was tested by conquest. My sister by diplomacy." A pause. "For me, my father chose survival. I was to remain sealed in the vault until a champion freed me." Her gold eyes found his in the reflection on the glass. "And that champion would be granted my hand in marriage." Bram felt something cold move through his chest. "Your hand," he said slowly. "In marriage. To whoever opened the door. To whoever opened the door. To—" He stopped. Started again. "Hang on. I opened the door." "Yes," said Princess Alara. "You did." And the observation lounge with all its stars suddenly felt very small. Bram set his jaw, looked out at the nebula, looked at the woman whose father had sealed her in a box and called it love. "I'm not marrying anybody," he said. "For the record, I opened a door. That's the whole job." He expected her to be insulted. Princesses, he assumed, did not enjoy being unmarried in a hurry. Instead, something in her shoulders eased, as though he'd set down a weight she'd been braced to carry. 43 champions came for me, she said quietly. Not one of them came for me. They came for the throne behind me, the alliance behind me, the power I was a door to. She turned from the glass and looked at him directly, and her eyes were not laughing now. You are the first being in 3 cycles who has looked at me and seen a person, not a prize. Bram didn't know what to do with that, so he did what he always did. He told the truth. Where I'm from, he said, you don't lock people in boxes to see if they're worth keeping. You just keep them. That's the whole deal. He shrugged, awkward. Maybe that makes us crude, like your administrator says. No, said Alara. I think it makes you free. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said more softly, you speak of your home like a place you left in a hurry. And Bram, who never talked about it, found himself talking about it. Not all of it, just the shape. A transport called the Wanderer, a friend whose name he did not say, a failure that had a sound, a specific sound, that he still heard sometimes in the dark between sleeping and waking. He didn't tell her the ending. He didn't have to. She heard the ending in the way he stopped. And so you came out here, Alara said, and you made your life small. I've made my life safe. He corrected her, gently. Because there was a difference, and he had spent 10 cycles needing there to be a difference. Alara looked at him for a long moment. They are not the same thing, Bram, she said. I should know. I have just spent 3 cycles somewhere extremely safe. And for a moment, one strange, quiet, dangerous moment, Bram forgot all about the recyclers. Then the station chimed. Korvath's voice came down through the speakers, and it had changed. The careful authority was gone. Something underneath it had cracked. Attention! The Lyrian Imperial Envoy has arrived ahead of schedule. He requests immediate audience with Princess Alara. In the diplomatic hall, Bram watched it happen, watched the warmth leave her face the way heat leaves metal. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted. The young woman who had laughed at a spray can folded herself away, and in her place stood something colder, older royal. It seems, she said, my time here is ending. Hey. Bram took a step toward her. You don't have to. Will you come with me? She said it fast, almost before he'd finished. And under the royal stillness, he heard the thing she was trying not to let him hear. I would like one friendly face. In that room. Bram looked at her. He thought about 10 cycles of quiet, about the wall he'd built, about how easy it would be to say, I've got recyclers, and walk away and let the Empire take its princess back. I'm covered in grease, he said. You freed me covered in grease. A small smile, real this time. I think it is only right you meet my father's envoy the same way. The diplomatic hall had been cleaned. The scorch marks were gone. The cracked walls patched. The broken weapons of 43 legends swept away like they'd never been. The room looked dignified again. The room looked like it had a future. It was lying. The envoy stood in the center of it, and he made the princess look plain. His skin shimmered actual gold. His robes were not cloth. They were woven strands of light shifting as he breathed. A crown floated above his head, held up by nothing turning slowly. His eyes were the same gold as Alara's. but hers had warmth in them. His had arithmetic. "Your Highness." He bowed, and the bow was a beautiful, perfect hollow thing. "The Emperor rejoices at your freedom. He awaits your return with great joy, Lord Valen." Ilara's voice was a closed door. "I am pleased to be free. Allow me to present the one responsible." She did not hesitate. "This is Bram Holloway, a human mechanic. He opened the ethereal vault." Valen's gold eyes slid to Bram, slid down him, took in the coveralls, the grease, the faded can still hanging from his belt loop, and smiled. It was the worst smile Bram had ever seen. Polite all the way down to the bone, and nothing behind it at all. A mechanic. Valen turned the word over like a coin he suspected was counterfeit. "How charming." He looked back to Ilara. "Surely there has been some confusion, Your Highness. The reports claim a maintenance worker succeeded where the finest champions of the galaxy failed." "The reports," Bram said, "are accurate." He hadn't meant to speak. It just happened. Valen's eyes returned to him, and the temperature of those eyes had dropped. "The vault was stuck," Bram said anyway. "I unstuck it. That's the whole report." A long silence. Valen's golden skin darkened a shade orange, creeping in at the edges like heat through paper. "You will forgive me," the envoy said softly, "if I require more than the word of a man who smells of solvent." Bram pulled the can off his belt, held it up, let the faded blue and yellow catch the light. "This is what I used," he said. "The seam was corroded. I sprayed it, waited 5 minutes, pulled the door open." He set the can down on the polished table between them gently, like setting down a chess piece. "You're welcome to test it yourself. The smell takes a while to leave." Valen stared at the can, and something happened to his face. Something Bram recognized, because he had seen it on 43 Legends today. It was the look of a man whose entire understanding of the world had just been handed a much simpler explanation, and hated it. "The Emperor," Valen said at last, and his voice had gone very smooth, very careful. "Prepared a great celebration for the champion who freed his daughter." His gold eyes lifted to Bram, including, of course, the traditional reward, her hand in marriage. Bram's stomach dropped through the floor. "I already said no to that." Said, for the first time, Valen's composure flickered. "You said no," loudly. "About an hour ago." Bram spread his hands. "Look, I don't want a reward. I don't want a throne or a title or a wife I met this morning. I've got a job. I've got a recycler that needs me by second shift. So thank you. But no." He thought that would end it. He was a mechanic. He thought no was a complete sentence. He thought a man could simply decline a thing he didn't want, and the universe would shrug and move along. He was wrong. Valen was very still for a moment, and then he smiled again. And this smile was worse than the first one, because this smile had found something. "How unfortunate," the envoy said. "You see, the Emperor's decree is quite specific. The princess is freed only when claimed by a worthy champion. The opening of the vault and the claiming of the reward are not two events." He let that settle. He watched it land. They are one event. The test is one event. The hall had gone very quiet. Bram felt the cold creeping up the back of his neck. "Say it plain." "If the champion declines the reward," Valen said, then the champion has not truly completed the test. And if the test is not complete, no. Ilara's voice cut across the hall. Sharp, bare. Then the princess, Valen finished gently, terribly, was never truly freed at all. He turned to her. Her face had gone white beneath the silver light of her skin. Your Highness, said Lord Valen, I am afraid you must return to the vault until a proper champion claims you, as tradition demands. The whole room seemed to tilt. Bram looked at the princess who had laughed at his spray can in a room full of ruined legends. The woman who had stood at a window and told a stranger she only wanted to be seen as a person. He looked at the open vault behind her. That cube, that box, that beautiful, patient, terrible mouth waiting to close around her again, and 10 cycles of carefully built quiet. 10 cycles of the narrow life, the small jobs. The wall went very still inside him. Bram Holloway stepped forward, put himself between the princess and the box, and said one word. No. Part 2. The word hung in the diplomatic hall like a struck bell, no. Bram heard it leave his mouth and felt every eye in the room turn toward him. Felt the weight of it. Felt how small he was. One mechanic in stained coveralls standing between an empire and the thing it had come to collect. Lord Valen looked at him the way you look at a tool that has started talking. I beg your pardon, the envoy said. You heard me. Bram's voice stayed level. He didn't know how. Inside his heart was doing something complicated. She's not going back in the box. You have no authority here, human. Maybe not. Bram took a step closer. Close enough that Valen, for all his floating crown and woven light, had to tilt his head down. But I've got a question, and I'd like to ask the administrator. He turned. Corvath stood at the edge of the hall, 4 eyes unreadable scales, perfectly still, a Draxian, holding himself the way men hold themselves when something inside is moving fast. Administrator, Bram said. The coalition, it has asylum laws, doesn't it? The hall went very quiet, because Corvath did not answer right away, and the not answering was its own answer. Bram watched the administrator's gaze flick to Ilara, to Valen, to the open mouth of the vault, and watched something settle in him. A decision. It does, Corvath said. Valen's golden skin went a shade darker. Administrator. Any sentient being, Corvath continued, and his voice had found its floor again deep and certain, may request asylum on coalition territory if they hold reasonable fear of persecution or unjust treatment in their place of origin. She is Lyrian royalty. Valen's smooth voice had cracked down the middle. She cannot claim asylum from her own empire. The law was never written for any sentient being. Corvath did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. The coalition recognizes no exceptions. Not for birth, not for blood, not for crowns. And then everyone in that hall turned, slowly, toward the princess. Ilara stood very still. Bram watched her. Watched the choice cross her face like weather, because he understood suddenly exactly what was being asked of her. To say the words would be to call her own father a tyrant, in front of his envoy, in front of witnesses, to burn the only home she had ever known, on purpose, with her own voice. She looked at the vault. She looked at Bram, and Bram did not say a word. He just stood there, being a friendly face, in that room, the way she'd asked him to. Ilara lifted her chin. "I, Princess Ilara of the Lyrian Empire," she said, and her voice did not shake, which Bram thought was the bravest thing he had ever heard. "Formally request asylum aboard Halcyon 9. I hold reasonable fear that my father will continue to use me as an instrument of state, without regard for my life, my will, or my consent." The words landed, and the room changed around them. Bram felt it. The way a room changes when someone says a true thing out loud that everyone has been pretending not to know. Valen's hand drifted toward the weapon at his hip. An ornate thing. Expensive. Bram tensed. "I would not," said Korvath. The administrator had not moved, but 4 eyes were fixed on Valen now, and there was something in them that had not been there before. Something old. Something that remembered being dangerous. "The request has been made," Korvath said. "It will be processed according to coalition law. Princess Ilara is now under the protection of this station. Any attempt to remove her by force will be treated as an act of aggression against the coalition itself." For a long, long moment, Lord Valen did not move. Then his hand fell away from the weapon. He bowed. Stiff. Shallow. A bow with a knife folded inside it. "As you wish, Administrator." His gold eyes found Bram one last time, and what was in them now was not contempt. Contempt would have been kinder. It was patience. But understand this mechanic. The Empire does not forget, and it does not lose. It simply waits for a better moment. He turned. His robes of woven light trailed behind him like a comet's tail. Beautiful and cold, and the great door sealed shut at his back with a hiss that sounded almost like a held breath finally let go. The hall was silent. And then Princess Ilara's knees gave out. Bram caught her. It wasn't graceful. He got an arm around her before she folded, and she leaned into him, and he could feel her shaking. Really shaking now, the way a person shakes after the danger is over, and the body finally admits it was afraid the whole time. "I've got you," he said. Quiet. Just for her. Doors closed. He's gone. "I called my father a tyrant." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. Wondering. Horrified. "In front of witnesses, I burned it all down." "Yeah." Bram looked at the sealed door, at the swept clean hall, at the box. "You did." That was how Princess Ilara of the Lyrian Empire became a mechanic's apprentice. Bram still wasn't entirely sure how it had happened. Coalition law, it turned out, did not let a person simply exist on a station. Asylum came with strings. An asylum seeker had to contribute, had to justify her air, her water, her place in the recycled life of Halcyon 9. And when Korvath had explained this gently for a Draxian, Ilara had looked around the diplomatic hall. At the walls, Bram's work had helped repair, and asked a question that Bram was still recovering from. Do you think a mechanic could use an apprentice? So now there was a princess in his maintenance bay, and she was, Bram would say later, the single worst apprentice in the recorded history of the trade. The first time he handed her a hydro wrench, she held it the way you hold a sleeping infant, like it might wake, like it might object. "It's a wrench," Bram said. "I am aware. It's not going to bite you. You don't know that. I don't know that." She turned it over, studied it from a new angle, as though the danger might be hiding on the other side. "Yesterday I learned that doors rust. Today I trust nothing." The first time he asked her to climb into a maintenance shaft, she stood at the narrow black opening for a full 30 seconds. "It's small," she said. "It's a shaft. They're all small." "I have recently spent 3 cycles in a box, Bram. I have developed opinions about small." But she went in. That was the thing about her Bram was learning. She was afraid of a great many things, and she did them anyway. She would stand at the edge of a fear and name it out loud, and then she would walk straight into it, as if naming it had used it up. He had not met many people who could do that. He was not entirely sure he could do it himself. And the first time she got grease on her hands, really got it on, dark and slick, worked deep into the lines of her luminous skin. She stopped, held her hands up to the light, and stared at them for so long that Bram set down his tools and came over half expecting tears. "Hey," he said, "it washes off. Mostly. Eventually. I am not upset." Ilara kept staring at her hands, turning them slowly. "I am Bram. In my entire life, no one has ever permitted me to be dirty. Not once. There were people whose entire purpose was to ensure I was clean." She looked up at him, and she was not crying. She was something stranger. She was delighted. "This is the first honest mess I have ever been allowed to make." And Bram had to turn back to his tools, quickly, because something in his chest had done a thing he was not prepared to explain. She learned slowly. She learned badly. She asked more questions in a single shift than Bram's last 3 apprentices had asked combined, and half of them started with, "But why?" and the other half started with, "But why?" and then got worse. But she learned. She learned the difference between a hydro wrench and a plasma torch eventually, after one alarming afternoon. She learned to read a pressure gauge. She learned that a pipe which knocks is a pipe with air in it, and a pipe which screams is a pipe about to teach you something expensive. And she learned the thing Bram could not teach, the thing he could only watch. She learned that the work mattered. That when they sealed a coolant line somewhere 3 decks away, a family slept warm. That when they cleared a filter, the air in 100 lungs got cleaner. That the work was small and invisible, and nobody would ever thank them for it. And she loved it anyway. "You were a princess," Bram said, once the two of them folded into the cramped dark of an environmental control room, replacing a pump that had been dying for a decade. "You had everything. Now you've got a sore back and a coolant stain that's never coming out of that sleeve." "I had everything," Ilara agreed. She passed him the sealant without being asked, which she had not been able to do a week ago, and Bram noticed and did not mention it. "I had everything, and I was a decoration. I smiled at nobles. I learned 100 ways to say nothing beautifully. I was a chess piece that the other pieces called Your Highness." She watched him seat the new pump. "This is the first thing I have ever done that was real. When this pump runs, people breathe. That is not nothing, Bram. That is the opposite of nothing." Bram tightened the last coupling, said nothing, because his throat had gone strange again, and he was beginning to suspect that the princess did that to him on purpose. And the worst part, the genuinely alarming part, was that he had stopped minding. It was the air that told him something was wrong. Bram had spent a long time in recycled air. You stopped smelling it the way you stopped smelling your own home. But you never stopped feeling it, the faint, constant pressure of a station breathing the rhythm of it, the way a good life support system has a pulse. And one shift, 3 weeks into having a princess for an apprentice, Bram felt the pulse skip. It was nothing. A flicker in a gauge on deck 9. The kind of thing a tired technician would log and forget. Bram did not forget it, because the next shift it happened on deck 4, and the shift after that deck 11. "That's wrong," Bram said. He was standing in front of the main environmental display, and Alara was beside him, and he was pointing at a pattern that should not have been a pattern. Life support doesn't fail like that. It is failing, though. Alara frowned at the display. 3 decks, in 3 shifts. "That's what I'm telling you." Bram traced the points with a grease-dark finger. Deck 9, Deck 4, Deck 11. Systems fail because they're old, or they're stressed, or they're badly built, and when they fail near things, near a heat source, near a power draw, near where the strain is. He tapped the 3 points. These 3 have nothing in common. No shared line, no shared load. Nothing. He let his hand drop. This isn't the station getting old, Alara. She had gone very still beside him. Then what is it? This is somebody making a point. Bram's voice was quiet. These failures aren't happening. They're being placed. The silence that followed had teeth. Sabotage. Alara said the word like she was testing whether it would hold her weight. "You think someone aboard this station is—" She stopped, and Bram watched her arrive at. It watched the gold of her eyes go cold and certain. "Valen. He told us," Bram said, "right to our faces. The Empire waits for a better moment." He looked at the 3 blinking points of failure. He's not waiting. He's building the moment. He breaks enough of this station, makes it dangerous enough, and the people who live here will do his work for him. They'll beg Korvath to hand you over, just to make it stop. Alara's hands had curled into fists at her sides. "They would not," she said, but it wasn't certainty. It was hope wearing certainty's coat. They would. Bram said it gently, because it was true, and because she deserved the truth from at least one person in her life. Scared people do scared things. It's not evil. It's just arithmetic. One stranger's safety against everyone's. He shook his head. We've got to find his man before the math gets loud. They found him by thinking like mechanics, Valen's agent. And there had to be an agent, because the Envoy's ship had left orbit days ago, and the failures kept coming was clever. Bram would give him that. Each act of sabotage was disguised as ordinary decay, a worn seal, a fatigued coupling, a panel that had simply plausibly given up. But sabotage has a signature. The same way every mechanic's repair has a signature. Bram had spent his life learning to read the hands behind a piece of work, to look at a patched seal and know whether the man who patched it was patient or rushed, trained or guessing. And whoever was breaking Halcyon 9 had very particular hands. He always cuts the same way, Bram murmured. They were crouched in a service crawl space on Deck 6, Bram's old scanner casting blue light across a coupling that had been helped to fail. See the strain marks? He doesn't smash it. He weakens it. A little. So it'll break later on its own when he's 3 decks away with a clean alibi. He sat back. He's trained. Real maintenance training. He knows our systems. That narrows it. Alara was learning to think like this. Bram could hear it. How many aboard have real training? 40, maybe 50. That does not feel narrow. It's narrow enough. Bram killed the scanner light. Because here's the thing about a saboteur. He has to be near the failures before they happen, to set them. But he has to be far from them after. He looked at her in the dark. Everybody on this station has a shift log. Where they were. When. We don't look for the man who was near the failures, Alara. Half the maintenance crew was near the failures, that's their job. We look for the man who was always near, and then always suddenly, somewhere else. It took them 2 shifts. 2 shifts of cross-referencing logs in a borrowed office, while Korvath pretended not to know what they were doing. And when the pattern finally surfaced, when one name kept floating to the top of every list present before, and absent after before, and absent before, and absent. Bram felt no triumph, just something heavy and sad. The name belonged to a technician, a quiet one, a man named Oren Castell, who had worked the recyclers on deck 3 for 11 cycles, who had a tired face and a careful manner, who had once Bram remembered lent him a torque calibrator and not asked for it back. I know him, Bram said. He was staring at the name. He's not a monster. He's just... He shook his head. The Empire has money, and he has a family back in Lyrian space, and Valen would have known exactly which string to pull. Alara was quiet a moment. You feel sorry for him, she said. The man trying to put me back in the box. I feel sorry for everybody Valen touches. Bram closed the log. Including you. They were too slow by exactly 1 shift, because they were still deciding how to handle it gently, quietly, without making a scared man more dangerous when the station screamed. Bram had never heard that alarm before. He'd heard every other alarm Halcyon 9 owned. He had not heard this one, and the not knowing told him everything. This was the alarm a station saves, the one it hopes never to use. Decompression. Deck 12. Bram was already moving, already running the words coming out in pieces between strides. Residential. Castell's not making a point anymore. He's Alara. He's finishing it. She was running beside him. Coveralls. Tool bag over her shoulder. A princess of the Lyrian Empire, sprinting through a maintenance corridor toward a hull breach. And Bram had one clear, ridiculous thought in the middle of all of it. She didn't even hesitate. Deck 12 was chaos. A residential corridor. 8 quarters. And at the far end, a sealed emergency bulkhead had slammed down. The way bulkheads do automatically, mercilessly, the moment the air pressure on the other side starts to fall. Bram knew what that meant. He knew it the way you know your own name. There were people behind that bulkhead, and the air behind that bulkhead was leaving. A small crowd had gathered on the safe side. Daxon was there, all 4 arms useless against a problem that could not be cut or struck. A maintenance crew clustered at a console, faces gray fingers flying, getting nowhere. It won't override. The crew chief turned as Bram skidded up. The breach is venting too fast. The system won't lift the bulkhead while the pressure differential's this high. It'll just kill everyone in the corridor instead. We can't get to them, Holloway. We can't get the door up." Bram looked at the bulkhead. He looked at the console, at the readouts, at the math, the cold, loud math, the air on the other side draining toward zero. And then he did the thing that had freed a princess. The thing 43 legends could not do. He stopped looking at the problem like a tragedy and started looking at it like a machine. "You're trying to lift the door," he said. "Obviously, we're trying to lift the... Don't lift the door." Bram was already crouched at the access panel beside the bulkhead, prying it open, hands moving on their own. The door's not the problem. The door's doing exactly what it's built to do. The problem is the pressure. The system won't open the bulkhead because the system thinks opening it is murder. So we don't argue with the system. His fingers found the manual feed lines. We change its mind. "Bram!" Ilara was at his shoulder. "Tell me what you need." And it was the way she said it. Not what's happening. Not will it work. Just tell me what you need that steadied his hands. "Emergency air reserve," he said. "Every station has one. A backup tank for exactly this. It's not enough to repressurize a breached deck. That's why nobody uses it. It just buys minutes. But I don't need to repressurize the deck." He stripped the casing off a valve. "I just need to pump enough air into that corridor, fast enough, to shrink the pressure gap, to make the system believe it's safe to lift the door." "You are going to lie to the station." "I am going to lie to the station." Bram's hands were flying now. "Daxon, that red feed line, the thick one, I need it cross-connected to this junction, and I need it done in about 90 seconds, and I need you not to ask me why." "I will not ask you why." The night was already moving. "I will simply be astonished later." It was not elegant. It was the opposite of elegant. It was a mechanic and a knight and a princess hauling an emergency feed line across a corridor floor and forcing it into a junction it was never designed to meet, while a station screamed and the air ran out 3 meters away. "Ilara." Bram didn't look up. "When I open this valve, the pressure in that corridor is going to spike. Hard. I need you watching that gauge. The blue one. The second it crosses the green line, the second you tell me. Because if I open this bulkhead too early, the air rushes the wrong way and we lose them. And if I open it too late, we lose them anyway." Ilara's voice was steady. Her eyes were locked on the gauge. "I understand. Open the valve." Bram opened the valve. The feed line bucked in Daxon's grip like something alive. Air roared. The gauge needle began to climb slow, then faster, crawling up out of the red and into the long, anxious yellow. "Climbing," Ilara said. Yellow. Still yellow. The corridor behind the bulkhead was filling. Bram could hear it, a deep, rushing hiss, air flooding into a space that was hungry for it. But the breach was still open. The breach was still drinking. It was a race now pure and simple between the tank he was emptying and the hole he could not reach. Yellow. Ilara's voice did not waver. Still yellow. "Bram the tank, how much is left?" "Don't think about the tank." Bram's hand was on the bulkhead release, white-knuckled, waiting. "Watch the gauge. Only the gauge." The needle climbed. The hiss of the emptying tank changed pitch thinner, now higher, the sound of a reserve running toward its end. "Bram!" "Gauge, Ilara." The needle touched the green line. "Green!" Ilara shouted. "Green. Green." Green. Bram threw the release, and the bulkhead, which had refused every command for 6 minutes, which the system had guarded like a grave, the bulkhead rose. It rose because the station, checking its math one last time, had finally been told a number it could believe. Air rushed, equalized, and through the rising door in the sudden roar of 2 pressures becoming one. Bram saw them, a family, 4 of them, an elderly couple and 2 grandchildren pressed into the farthest corner of a corridor that had been trying to kill them alive. Gasping alive. Daxon and the maintenance crew surged forward to pull them clear, and Bram Holloway sat down. Right there, on the cold deck plating, because his legs had quietly informed him they were finished. Ilara sat down beside him. Not gracefully. Neither of them had grace left. For a moment, they just breathed. "You lied to a space station," she said finally, "and it saved 4 lives. Told you." Bram tipped his head back against the bulkhead, closed his eyes. Stubbornness and ingenuity never could tell them apart. He felt her hand find his, grease and all, holding on. He didn't pull away. He noticed that. He noticed it with a small, quiet alarm, the way you notice a sound in your house at night. I didn't pull away. And then he noticed that the alarm wasn't really alarm at all. And then he stopped noticing things and just held her hand. On the floor, while a station breathed around them, they caught Oren Castell an hour later. He didn't run. That was the part that stayed with Bram. They found him in his quarters on deck 3, sitting on the edge of his bunk, hands folded, waiting, a tired man who had done a terrible thing and discovered too late that it had nearly become an unforgivable one. "I never meant for deck 12, Castell said. He didn't look up. "The breach that wasn't supposed to. I weakened a seam. That's all. I weakened seams. It's supposed to fail slow. Empty. Days from now. Nobody was supposed to be." His voice broke clean in half. "They have my daughter's medical bills. The Empire. They have my whole life in a folder. What was I supposed to—" "I know," Bram said, and he did. That was the terrible part. He looked at Oren Castell, and he did not see a monster. He saw a man who had been handed an impossible problem by people who knew exactly how to break him. He saw a man the Empire had used the way Valen used everything, the way the Emperor had used his own daughter. Bram had thought walking in that he would be angry. He found standing there that he was mostly just tired. "You'll answer for it," Korvath said from the doorway. The administrator's voice was not cruel, but it was not soft. "4 lives. You will answer for that. But your testimony technician names the Empire as the hand behind it, and that is worth a great deal." He paused. "More than you currently believe." They led him away. He went quietly. He thanked them, which Bram could not stand. And then he was gone, and the corridor was empty, and it was just Bram and Ilara, and the long ringing quiet that comes after a thing is finally over. "He was right to be afraid," Ilara said softly. "My father does keep folders. He keeps a folder on everyone. I have seen them." She wrapped her arms around herself. "There is probably one on you now, Bram, because of me. Let him keep his folder." Bram rubbed a hand down his face. left a streak of grease he didn't notice. I've got nothing in it worth taking. That's the one good thing about a small life. There's nothing to threaten. He meant it as comfort. He watched it fail to be comfort. He watched Alara look away. Corvath called them to his office the next shift. Bram had been in that office exactly twice before, in 11 cycles. And both times it had been about plumbing. The room was a controlled landslide of data pads and flickering displays, and the administrator sat behind his desk like a man bracing for weather. "The Emperor has made his move," Corvath said. No greeting. Bram appreciated that distantly. Alara's voice was steady. "Tell me." "He has filed a formal claim with the Coalition High Council." Corvath's scales rippled anger. Bram had learned to read it now. "He does not name you a daughter, Your Highness. He names you property. Stolen property. He demands your return. And he has attached a threat, economic sanction, against any coalition world that trades with a station which shelters you." The words landed in the small office like stones into still water. "That is," Alara's hands had gone white. "That would ruin Halcyon 9. The station survives on trade. He would be starving 30,000 people. To reclaim one." "Yes." Corvath did not soften it. "He would, and the High Council knows it, which is why the Council is under pressure to resolve this, quickly and quietly." "Resolve it how?" Bram's voice came out rougher than he meant. "Hand her back, after everything. After she nearly—" He stopped himself, started again. "There has to be another way." Corvath looked at him for a long moment with all four eyes, and Bram had the sudden unwelcome feeling of a man watching a trap he himself had walked into. "The Emperor's claim," the administrator said slowly, "rests on a single point of law. Princess Alara is unmarried. An unmarried daughter of the Lyrian throne remains under their code, the legal ward of her father. His to command, his to recall." "And if she weren't unmarried?" Bram asked, and then heard himself ask it, and felt the floor of the conversation drop away beneath him. "Then," Corvath said gently, "his claim collapses. A married woman passes from the authority of her father to the household of her own making. The Emperor would have no standing. The sanction would have no basis. The case would be over." The office was very quiet. Bram looked at Alara. Alara looked at the floor. "You are suggesting," she said carefully, "a marriage of legal convenience." "I am suggesting," Corvath said, "the only door I can find in a room with no doors." And then the administrator's four eyes turned, slowly, inevitably, to Bram. It would have to be someone the Emperor cannot intimidate, cannot buy. Someone with no fortune to threaten and no title to revoke. A pause. Someone who has already publicly placed himself between this princess and her cage. Bram's mouth had gone dry. "You can't be serious." "I am rarely anything else. I'm a mechanic." Bram was on his feet now, though he didn't remember standing. "I fix recyclers. I don't know anything about courts or law, or I'd be the worst possible." "Bram." It was Alara. Quiet. And he stopped because she had not used that voice before. She rose from her chair and crossed the small office and stood in front of him, and her gold eyes were searching his face for something. And Bram realized with a lurch that he was afraid, genuinely afraid, of what she might find there. Because here was the truth he had not let himself look at. He had spent 10 cycles building a small life, a safe life, a life with nothing in it worth threatening. And he had built it for a reason named the Wanderer, a reason that wore the face of a friend he had failed to save. Bram did not fix big things anymore. Bram fixed recyclers, because recyclers, when you failed them, did not die. And now a princess was standing in front of him, asking without asking, to let her become a thing in his life that could break. "What do you want, Alara?" he said, because it was the only honest question left. Not the law, not the council. You. What do you want? She didn't look away. He'd give her that forever. She didn't look away. "I want to keep fixing pumps," she said. "I want to climb into shafts I am still afraid of. I want to make honest messes with my own 2 hands. I want to choose my own life." A breath. "And I'm asking you to help me keep the right to choose it. Not because you must, not because the law says, because I am asking. As your friend, as Bram, look at me as someone who would never ever ask you to fix her, only to stand beside her, while she learns to fix herself." And that was the thing that undid him. Because Bram had spent his whole life terrified of being asked to fix people. People were not recyclers. People broke in ways that stayed broken. And he had been bracing this whole conversation for her to ask him to be her hero, her champion, her solution. She hadn't. She'd asked him to stand next to her, while she did it herself. Bram thought of the cargo door on Outpost 12, rusted shut for a decade. Everyone said unfixable. And it hadn't needed force. It hadn't needed a hero. It had just needed someone willing to stay. 6 hours, with penetrating oil, and a stubborn, unreasonable, completely irrational faith that most stuck things given patience can still be moved. He looked at the princess. "Okay," he said. Her breath caught. "Okay, okay." Bram managed something that was almost a smile. "If a piece of paper keeps you free, if a signature keeps 30,000 people fed and 1 woman out of a box, then okay. We'll sign the paper. We'll figure out the rest as it comes." He shrugged, helpless, terrified, and somehow underneath all of it sure. "I'm a mechanic. We're good at figuring out the rest as it comes." Korvath's scales rippled with something that on a Draxian might have been relief, or approval, or both. "Then I will prepare the documents," the administrator said. "A coalition marriage is a simple thing. Consent. From both parties. And 2 witnesses. It can be done within the day." It was done within the day. In the diplomatic hall. Because of course it was the diplomatic hall, the same room, the same scene of the crime, and Bram thought there was something almost funny about that. A circle closing. The scorch marks gone. The cracks patched. The vault still standing in the corner like a guest nobody had invited. Daxon stood as one witness, all 4 arms folded, radiating a pride that embarrassed everyone. Prisme 9 floated as the other her crystal body throwing soft rainbows across the floor, recording everything for what she insisted was historical documentation. And what Bram suspected was simply that she did not want to miss it. Bram wore his cleanest coveralls. They were not clean. There was a coolant stain near the left cuff that had been with him for 2 cycles, and would he understood now be with him for the rest of his life. He had decided not to be ashamed of it. Ilara wore simple robes, silver and soft blue. Not the starlight she had worn out of the vault. Nothing that shimmered. Nothing that announced. Just a quiet color. Her floating hair had been tied back practical the way she wore it for work now, and her gold eyes were bright with something Bram could not name and was afraid to. Corvath spoke the words. The plain coalition words. Nothing about empires. Nothing about thrones. Words about partnership. About respect. About 2 people choosing to stand in the same direction. Bram said them back. His voice did something strange in the middle, and he pushed through it. Ilara said them back. Her voice did not waver, and Bram understood by now exactly how much that cost her, and exactly how brave it was. There was no kiss. It wasn't that kind of wedding. It was the legal kind, the convenient kind, the kind you do to keep a folder closed and a station fed. They simply signed. 2 names on a coalition document. Bram Holloway. Ilara. No surname for her. She had left it in the vault, she said, with the rest of the things her father owned. I now recognize you, said Corvath, as married, under coalition law. A pause. The administrator's mandibles clicked soft. Congratulations, whatever they're worth. And it should have ended there. That was the plan. Sign the paper. Close the folder. Win. Except Bram had just set down the stylus. Ilara had just looked up at him and started almost to smile. And the great doors of the diplomatic hall were still echoing with the quiet of a thing completed when the station alarm sounded. Not decompression. Bram knew that one now, and this was not that. This was deeper. Wider. The alarm that does not mean something has broken. The alarm that means something is coming. Corvath's hand went to the console at his wrist. Bram watched the administrator read whatever it told him. Watched 4 eyes go very, very still. What? Said Ilara. What is it? Corvath looked up. A Lyrian warship, he said quietly, has just dropped out of the dark, at the edge of our space. His voice did not rise. It did not have to. It is not slowing down. It is not requesting audience. It is making directly for Halcyon 9. And in the corner of the diplomatic hall, silent and patient, and 4,000 cycles old, the empty vault waited its door still open, as if it had always known she would be back. Part 3. The warship filled the observation window like a closed fist. Bram had seen warships before, from a distance. The way you see weather, you're glad isn't yours. But this one was not at a distance. This one hung against the stars off Halcyon 9's bow, gold-hulled and enormous, close enough that Bram could see the gun ports along its flank, and each gun port was a small, dark promise. Beside him, Ilara did not move. She had gone very still, the kind of still that costs something. That is the Sovereign's mercy, she said quietly. My father's personal flagship. He named it himself. A breath. He has a sense of humor. It is just not a kind one. The station was on her bones already. Bram could feel it through the deck plating. 30,000 people, 3 decks down and 12 decks up, all of them suddenly aware that the math of their lives had a stranger in it. Korvath's voice came over the station-wide channel. Calm. The administrator was very good at calm. All personnel, remain at your stations. There is no cause for alarm. There was, Bram thought, every cause for alarm. But you didn't say that to 30,000 people. You said remain calm, and you went and found the trouble yourself. So that was what they did. Lord Valen's face filled the diplomatic hall's communication display, and he was smiling. Administrator Korvath. The envoy's voice was warm, which was the worst thing about it. Mechanic Holloway. And, Your Highness. Still here. Still in your charming little costume. State your business, Lord Valen. Korvath did not smile back. My business is mercy. Valen spread his golden hands. The Emperor in his wisdom has decided to spare you a long and ruinous legal process. The Sovereign's mercy will dock in 6 hours. Princess Alara will be aboard it when it departs. The smile widened. Or Halcyon 9 will discover what it means to be a station that no convoy will approach. No food, no medicine, no trade. A slow death administrator. 6 hours. Choose. She has claimed asylum, Korvath said. She is married under coalition law. The Emperor's claim is void. The Emperor's claim, said Valen, is whatever the Emperor's warship says it is. And the display went dark. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Bram said the thing he'd been thinking. He's bluffing on the guns. He has to be. Firing on a coalition station that's not a sanction, that's a war. Even an emperor can't. He will not need the guns, Alara said softly. Bram looked at her. You do not understand my father, Bram. He is patient. He is cruel in a patient way. Her gold eyes were fixed on the dark display. He will not fire. He does not have to fire. He only has to sit there. 6 hours. And then 12. And then a day. A warship in the window. And he will let this station's own fear do every cruel thing he is too careful to do himself. She turned to him. By tomorrow, the people of Halcyon 9 will be at Korvath's door. Not because they are wicked, because they are afraid. And they will ask him very reasonably why 30,000 lives should hang on the freedom of one. Bram opened his mouth to argue, and found he couldn't. Because she was right. He had said it himself weeks ago in front of a blinking display. Scared people do scared things. It's just arithmetic. He just hadn't expected the arithmetic to come for her. It came faster than even Alara predicted. It came in 4 hours. Bram was in the maintenance bay because he did not know what else to do with his hands, and his hands needed doing when the lights stuttered. Not the residential lights, not the corridor lights, the core lights, the deep ones, the ones wired straight to the heart of the station. Bram was already moving before the second stutter finished. Korvath! He had his wrist console up, running, the words coming out in pieces. The power core, tell me you feel that. Tell me that's a relay. It is not a relay. Korvath's voice was tight. Mechanic Holloway, the primary reactor regulation system has just gone into cascade failure. We have perhaps 20 minutes before the core scrams and this station goes dark. All of it, life support included. Bram's blood went cold. Because a dark station is a dead station. And Valen had told them 6 hours, and it had been 4. He moved his timeline, Bram said. Valen, he's not waiting 6 hours. He's making the choice for us. Dark station, panicked crew, and a warship offering to help. He hands Corvath a rescue and a ransom in the same breath. Castell is in custody. Ilara had appeared in the doorway, coveralls, tool bag ready. Always somehow, already ready. Who is doing this? Doesn't matter who. Bram was already grabbing tools. Valen's got more than one string. He always did. He looked up at her. The reactor regulation room is on the core deck. Nobody goes to the core deck. It's automated. Which means whoever sabotaged it had time and quiet and nobody watching. He slung the bag over his shoulder. Which means the fix is down there too. And nobody's coming but us. Ilara did not hesitate. She never hesitated. Bram had stopped being surprised by it and started somewhere along the way to lean on it. Then we go down, she said. Daxon met them at the lift. 4 arms. No weapons, he'd left them behind, and Bram understood why, because there was nothing down there to fight. Corvath sent me, the knight said. He believed you would need hands. I told him I have 4. Good, Bram said. You're going to use all of them. The core deck was a cathedral. That was the only word Bram had for it. Vast. Silent. The reactor at its center was a contained star, throwing hard white light up the curved walls, and the heat of it pressed against the skin like a hand. And all around it, racked floor to ceiling, ran the regulation systems, the delicate patient machinery that kept a star polite. And the regulation systems were dying. Bram saw it the moment the lift doors opened. Saw the cascade. A bank of cooling regulators failing one into the next, each failure feeding the next. A line of falling dominoes that ended. Bram's stomach dropped in the reactor's emergency scram. 12 minutes, Corvath's voice said in his ear. Mechanic Holloway. 12 minutes and the core shuts down. Bram ran to the regulator bank, dropped to his knees, tore the access panel free, and stopped, because what he saw inside did not make sense. The sabotage was elegant. It was beautiful the way a wound can be beautiful if you admire the knife. Someone had not broken the regulators. Someone had retuned them, crossed their feedback loops, made each one read the other's failure as its own success, so that the whole bank was busily, cheerfully destroying itself, while every gauge in the room reported that everything was fine. It was not a mechanic's work. This isn't Castell, Bram breathed. This isn't even a saboteur. This is... He sat back on his heels. His mind was racing, and not arriving. This is somebody who built these systems, or somebody who learned them from the people who did. This is Ilara. This is builder grade. And Ilara, crouched beside him, went very still. Bram, she said slowly. Say that again. It's builder work. Or close. The cross-tuning, the feedback logic, humans don't think like this. The coalition doesn't think like this. This is the vault. Her gold eyes were wide. Bram, the ethereal vault. It is builder work. It has sat in our diplomatic hall for 4,000 cycles, and the Empire has studied it. For generations. My father's engineers have done nothing but take that box apart and put it back together for my whole life. Her voice dropped. He did not send a saboteur, Bram. He sent a technique. He weaponized the one thing the Lyrian Empire understands better than anyone alive, and Bram felt the whole shape of it land on him at once. The empire that had locked a princess in a builder box had learned from that same box exactly how to take a station apart. 11 minutes, said Korvath. Bram looked at the dying regulators. Builder logic. Elegant. Cross-tuned. Designed by minds 4,000 cycles smarter than his weaponized by an empire that had spent generations studying their genius. And Bram Holloway mechanic second class of no fortune and no title felt something he had not felt in 10 cycles. He felt the Wanderer. Because this was the moment, wasn't it? This was the exact shape of the moment that had broken him. The system too clever. The clock too fast. The lives in the balance, and his own two hands not good enough, not fast enough, not smart enough. Bram. Ilara's hand was on his arm. Grease and all. You have gone somewhere, she said quietly. Come back. I can't outthink this. The words came out cracked. Ilara, I'm a recycler mechanic. This was built by the smartest people who ever lived. I can't... Stop. She did not say it harshly. She said it the way you stop a child from stepping off a curb. Listen to me. You did not outthink the vault. Do you remember 43 champions tried to outthink the vault? They lost. Her gold eyes held his. You did not defeat it with a greater mind, Bram. You defeated it because you refused to be impressed by it. You looked at the most advanced lock in the galaxy, and you saw a stuck door. Bram stared at her. So do not outthink this, Ilara said. Underthink it. That is your gift. That has always been your gift. The Empire built something brilliant. Find the stupid, simple human thing it forgot. And Bram looked back into the panel and stopped trying to be smart. He stopped looking at the elegant cross-tuned logic, the beautiful weaponized genius. He let his eyes go soft and dumb and tired, the way they went when a problem refused him, and he asked the only question a mechanic ever really asks. What does this machine actually want? And the regulators told him. They're confused, he said slowly. That's all. That's all this is. He was almost laughing. It was not entirely a sane laugh. Valen's people didn't break them. You can't break builder hardware, that's the whole point. It's immune to entropy. Prismy told us that in the first hour. They didn't break the regulators. They lied to them. They crossed the wires, so every regulator is listening to the wrong neighbor. Can you uncross them? Ilara asked. In 11 minutes, retune 60 regulators by hand in builder logic. I've never seen. Bram shook his head. No, never. Not in 100 minutes. Then, but I don't have to fix the lie. Bram's hands were moving now fast, sure the way they moved when the answer had arrived, and his body knew it before his mouth did. I just have to make them stop listening to it. He was stripping feed lines free, all of them, every cross-tuned connection. Daxon, every cable I hand you, pull it. Don't trace it. Don't think about it. Just pull. You were disconnecting the regulators from each other, Ilara breathed. You are. I'm cutting the conversation. Bram hauled another line loose. Every regulator is screaming a lie at the next one, so I shut up the whole room. No regulator talks to any other regulator. Each one just sits there, alone, doing the one stupid, simple job it was built to do. He looked up, wild-eyed, grinning, terrified. They don't need to be a brilliant system, Ilara. They never did. Valen made them brilliant so he could make them sick. I'm going to make them stupid again. And a stupid regulator can't be tricked, because a stupid regulator isn't listening to anybody. 6 minutes, said Corvath. They worked. A mechanic, a princess, and a knight on their knees in the cathedral light of a contained star, pulling cables out of a wall as fast as their hands could move. It was not elegant. It was the opposite of elegant. It was 3 pairs of hands, well 5, counting Daxon properly undoing 4,000 cycles of genius by simply stubbornly refusing to participate in it. The regulators began to fall silent, and one by one, cut loose from the lie, each of them did the small, dumb, honest thing it had been built to do. Cascade slowing, said Corvath. His voice had changed. Cascade Mechanic Holloway. The cascade is slowing. Keep pulling, Bram said. 3 minutes. Keep pulling. Elara pulled the last cable, and the cathedral went quiet. Truly quiet. The hard white light of the reactor steadied held, settled into the calm, even glow of a star that had been told by 60 small, stupid, honest machines that everything was fine. Because everything was. Cascade halted. Corvath's voice was very soft. The core is stable. Halcyon 9 is... A pause. Bram heard the administrator breathe. You have saved the station, Mechanic Holloway. Bram sat down on the floor of the core deck. He seemed to be doing that a lot lately. Sitting down on floors. He decided distantly that he had earned it. Elara sat down beside him. Daxon remained standing because Daxon always remained standing, but he placed one of his 4 hands briefly on Bram's shoulder, and from a Keltarian knight, that was practically an embrace. You underthought it, Elara said. I underthought it. Bram tipped his head back. Best thing I'm good at. And then the lift doors opened, and everything changed again. Bram's first thought was that he was hallucinating, because the woman who stepped out of the lift was Elara, except she wasn't. She was close, the same luminous skin, the same gold eyes, the same way of moving, as though the floor were a courtesy she had decided to accept. But her hair was not purple. It was deep red, the color of a banked fire. And she was younger. And she was not wearing royal robes. She was wearing plain traveler's clothes, dust-stained practical, and she carried a single battered bag. Elara was on her feet before Bram understood why. Senna, the word came out of her like something tearing. The red-haired woman stopped a few paces away, and for a moment, the two of them just looked at each other across the core deck, across the cathedral light. 2 sisters, and 4,000 cycles of their father's cruelty standing between them. Hello, sister, said Senna. How are you here? Elara's voice shook. You should be Senna. You should be in the capital. You should be safe. You should be in a box. Senna's smile was tired and familiar. Bram had seen that exact smile on Elara the first day in the wreckage of 43 Legends. Father put me in the vault, Elara, the same vault, 3 cycles ago, the moment they brought it back from this station. Elara had gone white. He tested you too. He tested me too. Senna set her bag down on the deck plating. 47 champions this time. He raised the number. He does that. He thinks a harder test makes a worthier daughter. Something flickered across her face. 47 champions came. 47 failed. Then how? Bram heard himself say it. How did you get out? And Senna looked at him, really looked. Took in the coveralls and the grease and the tool bag, and something in her tired face warmed. You must be the mechanic, she said. The one who opened my sister's vault with a can of spray. Father has forbidden your name in the palace, you should know. He calls you a corrupting human influence. It is the highest compliment he has ever paid anyone. She turned back to Alara. And to answer your question, sister, I got out the same way he did. Almost. The corrosion, Alara started. No. Senna shook her head. Not the corrosion. I did not have a can of human ingenuity. I had something better. I had time. 3 cycles of it. Sealed in the dark, with nothing to do but feel the walls. She paused. And on the second day, sister feeling the walls, I found a seam. In the back. Where no champion ever looks, because champions face the front. A seam that did not match the others. Bram had gone very still. It was a panel, Senna said. A service panel. Concealed but not locked. Not locked at all. Behind it a crawlway. Narrow. Dark. Built for a body to pass through. Her gold eyes moved to Bram. It took me 2 days to find it, and 1 more to be brave enough to crawl into it. But it was there. It had always been there. A maintenance hatch, Bram whispered. A maintenance hatch. Senna nodded. The old builder's mechanic were not gods. They were engineers. And no engineer who ever lived builds a sealed chamber without building a way to service it. The vault was never an unbreakable prison. She let the words fall slow into the silence of the core deck. It was a machine, and every machine has a back door for the one who has to fix it. The galaxy spent 4,000 cycles staring at the front of that box. 43 champions. 47 more. All of them looking for a way to defeat it. She almost smiled. Not one of them thought to look for the way someone was meant to maintain it. Bram sat on the floor of the core deck and felt something move through him that he could not name, because he had spent his whole life being told that the small work, the maintenance work, the invisible, unglamorous work, that it was the work you did when you weren't good enough for the real thing. And here was a princess, telling a room full of people that the maintenance hatch was the only honest door the builders ever made. The vault was never impossible, Alara said slowly. It was only ever stuck, and studied wrong, for 4,000 cycles. Your mechanic was the first being in 4,000 cycles to look at it and see a machine instead of a myth. Senna looked at her sister, and I was the first prisoner to do the same. She spread her hands. We are not so different, you and I. We both got free the moment we stopped being afraid of the box. The core deck was silent, and then Bram started very quietly to laugh. Because of course, 43 legendary weapons, star-forged blades, plasma, quantum unsealing arrays, a galaxy's worth of glory and force, all of it hurled at a box that had a door in the back the whole time. What? Said Alara. Nothing. Bram wiped his eyes. Just your father built his whole empire's reputation on a prison that had a service entrance. He shook his head. Stubbornness and ingenuity. The universe has a sense of humor. It's just not always a kind one. The Coalition High Council convened by hollow relay 9 hours later. Bram had never seen a High Council session. He had assumed it would be enormous. Thrones, banners, the weight of 1,000 worlds. It was a room. A plain room with a long table and a dozen tired-looking sentients of a dozen species, and a hollow relay in the center, through which the most powerful people in the sector argued about the fate of one mechanic's wife. Lord Valen was there, projected gold, and beautiful speaking for the Emperor. He spoke well. Bram would give him that. He spoke of property law and imperial tradition and the sanctity of a father's authority over an unwed daughter, and he made it all sound very reasonable, the way cruelty always sounds reasonable when it wears enough fabric. And then Princess Senna stepped into the relay's field, and the room stopped. "I am Senna of the Lyrian Empire," she said, "second daughter of Emperor Talion. And I am here to testify that everything Lord Valen has told you is built on a lie." What followed Bram would remember for the rest of his life, because Senna did not shout. She did not weep. She simply told them. In a clear, steady, unhurried voice, she told the High Council what the ethereal vault was. A prison their father used on his own children. A test. She told them about the 43 champions, and the 47, and the daughters sealed in the dark to see if they were worth the dynasty's name. She told them about the marriage prize daughters, handed like keys to whatever stranger proved strong enough to take them, and then she told them about the maintenance hatch. She told them the Empire's great unbreakable prison had a back door, and that the Empire had known, because the Empire had studied that vault for generations, and an empire that studies a box for generations finds the back door. They had known, and they had sealed their daughters in anyway, and called it a test, when it was only ever a performance. The High Council was very quiet when she finished, and Lord Valen Gold, and beautiful, and suddenly, visibly alone, said, "The Emperor will not dignify these domestic grievances with, I have one more thing to say." Senna's voice cut clean through his. "And it is not a grievance. It is a question. For my father, who I know is listening, because my father always listens. He simply never answers." She looked directly into the relay. "Father," she said, "when you were young, before the crown, did your father seal you in a box?" The silence that came down then was a different kind of silence, and Bram watched Lord Valen's beautiful golden face do something it had not done in 3 encounters. It flinched. "I found the records," Senna said softly. "It is remarkable what they let a princess read when they think she is only decorating a library. Emperor Talion, sealed in the ethereal vault, 3 cycles, by his own father, to prove himself worthy of the throne." Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "You did not invent the box, father. You inherited it. Someone did to you exactly what you did to us, and instead of breaking the chain," her voice finally slightly broke, "you decided your daughters should hurt the way you hurt. Because if it had not been a test, if it had only been cruelty, then you would have had to feel what was done to you, and you would rather build a vault than feel that." The relay was silent. Lord Valen did not speak. There was Bram understood nothing the envoy could say. Because you cannot argue with a wound when someone finally says its name out loud. The High Council ruled within the hour. The Emperor's claim was rejected. Princess Ilara's marriage was recognized. Her asylum was affirmed. And the sovereign's mercy that closed gold fist in the window was formally ordered to withdraw from coalition space, which it did slowly the way a thing leaves when it has run out of better options. It did not fire its guns. It had never been going to fire its guns. It had only ever been a box, trying to make the whole galaxy afraid of the dark inside it. The Emperor's last message arrived 3 days later. Corvath delivered it himself to the maintenance bay, where Bram and Ilara were elbow-deep in the Deck 7 recycler, because the Deck 7 recycler did not care about empires and had chosen this week of all weeks to finally back up. "The Emperor has responded to the Council's ruling," Corvath said. Ilara did not look up from the recycler. "Tell me, he has formally disowned you, both of you his daughters. He has struck your names from the dynasty. By imperial decree, Ilara and Senna of the Lyrian Empire are declared." Corvath paused. "Dead. To the Empire. Forever." The maintenance bay was quiet. Bram watched his wife's face, braced himself. Because dead to the Empire was a terrible thing to hear, even from a terrible father. And he did not know what it would do to her, and he was ready. He realized he was entirely ready to put down his wrench and simply hold her for as long as it took. But Ilara did not break. Ilara set down the coupling she was cleaning and looked at the recycler, and then she looked at Bram. And the smile that came across her face was the brightest, freest, most genuine thing Bram had ever seen on it. "So I am truly free," she said. "Legally," said Corvath. "Politically, and in every way that has ever mattered." His mandibles clicked soft. "You are no longer a Princess Ilara. By your father's own decree, you are simply Ilara Holloway, maintenance technician, second class." And Ilara Holloway laughed. It rolled through the maintenance bay the way it had rolled through the wreckage of 43 legends all those weeks ago, bright and unguarded, and hers. "Good," she said. Being a princess was exhausting. The hours were terrible, and the work was meaningless, and someone was always watching. She picked the coupling back up. "Being a mechanic is the first honest job I have ever had. Hand me the sealant. We have people on Deck 3 who would like their air to stop smelling like a crime." Bram handed her the sealant, and found to his quiet astonishment that his eyes were stinging, and that it had nothing to do with the recycler. Senna stayed. Of course, Senna stayed. There was nowhere else for a disowned princess to go, and as it turned out, nowhere else she wanted to be. Corvath processed her asylum with the weary efficiency of a man who was getting far too much practice. And then there were 2 former princesses in Bram's maintenance bay, learning to read pressure gauges and argue with stubborn couplings. And Bram, who had spent 10 cycles arranging his life to be small, looked around one shift and realized it had gotten extremely, irreversibly large. He found he did not mind. He found, in fact, that he could not remember why he had wanted it small. He thought he knew. The wanderer. The friend he could not save. 10 cycles of fixing only recyclers. 10 cycles of refusing to touch anything that might break in a way that mattered. He had built a wall, and he had called the wall safety. And he had lived behind it so long, he had stopped seeing it. The way you stop seeing grease under your nails. And then a princess had come out of a box and asked him not to be her hero, not to fix her, just to stand beside her, while she learned to fix herself. And somewhere in the standing, Bram had been fixed too. He understood that now the way you understand a machine once you've finally got the panel off. His worth had never been in the size of the thing he repaired. The Wanderer had not been his failure to carry. Forever it had been a stuck door he'd spent 10 cycles refusing to even look at, afraid of what might be on the other side. And what was on the other side, it turned out, was just this. A maintenance bay. 2 sisters. A station that breathed because he helped it. A wife who had married him for a piece of paper and stayed for the work. It was Alara who said it first. They were in a maintenance shaft on deck 12, the same deck Bram noted where they had once raced a hull breach, though it was a calm and ordinary repair, now just a faulty sensor, and a long, quiet hour in the dark. "I love you," Alara said. Bram nearly dropped the calibration tool because they had not said it. Not in all these weeks. They had married and worked and laughed and held hands on the floors of disasters, but they had circled the words the way you circle a thing too bright to look at directly. "You don't," Bram started. "You don't have to. I am not saying it because I have to." Alara's luminous skin glowed a little brighter in the dark of the shaft, and Bram had learned by now that this happened when she was happy. "I have spent my whole life in arrangements, marriages of state, alliances, affections measured out for advantage. I am finished saying things because I have to." She found his hand in the dark. "I love that you see problems where everyone else sees myths. I love that you treated me the same when you thought I was a prize, and when you knew I was a person. I love that you taught me to fix things. With these hands. My own hands." A breath. "I love you, Bram Holloway. I thought after everything you should simply be told." Bram set down the calibration tool, very carefully, because his hands had started to shake, and a man should not shake while holding a calibration tool. "I spent 10 cycles," he said, "making my life small, so nothing in it could ever break. So I'd never have to feel the thing I felt on the Wanderer, ever again." He turned to face her in the cramped dark. "And then you came out of that box, and you broke the wall, and you didn't even know you were doing it." He took her other hand, grease and all. "I love you, Alara. I love that you were brave enough to call your father what he was. I love that you chose a wrench over a crown. I love that you made an honest mess of my life and didn't apologize for it once." His voice cracked and he let it. "You didn't need rescuing. I figured that out somewhere around the 3rd coolant pump. You just needed somebody to stop looking at you like a door. And it turns out so did I." Alara kissed him. And the sensor beeped somewhere in the dark to remind them it still needed calibrating. And neither of them cared. They held the celebration in the observation lounge. Not a wedding they'd already done, the wedding. The small legal one, the one with the coolant stain. This was something better. This was the night a station having survived an empire decided to remember how to be glad. The long window held the whole turning galaxy. Stars scattered across the dark like salt on a black table. And gathered against that endless view were the people who had become somewhere along the way, and without anyone deciding it, a family. Daxon told a story about his combat training, that, as all of Daxon's stories did, ended in noble and total disaster. Prismy 9 floated through the crowd, her crystal body throwing soft rainbows, recording everything. Because she had now documented 18 royal weddings across 4 star systems, and insisted this was the only one worth keeping. Corvath, 2 cups of something Keltarian, into the evening attempted a joke. The translation failed completely. Everyone laughed anyway, which Bram thought was the truest kind of laughing there is. Senna stood at the window with her sister, the 2 of them red-haired and purple-haired against the stars, talking in the low, easy voices of women who had a great deal of lost time to spend. And Bram stood a little apart, just for a moment, just to look. He thought about the vault, still standing in the diplomatic hall, its door propped open now. Corvath kept meaning to have it removed, and kept somehow not getting around to it. Bram was glad. He thought every station should keep one, a box that had terrified the galaxy for 4,000 cycles, and turned out in the end to be only a stuck door with a service hatch in the back. The galaxy had thrown its legends at that box, its heroes, its star-forged glory, and it had taken a man with a spray can to walk up and see it plain. Alara crossed the lounge and slipped her hand into his. Grease worked deep into both their palms now, a matched set. "You have gone somewhere again," she said. "Come back." "I'm here." Bram squeezed her hand. "Just thinking about boxes." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and her floating hair drifted against his jaw. "Everyone I ever knew," she said, watching the stars turn, "spent their lives trying to be the strongest, the cleverest, the most worthy. They wanted to be the champion who could break any door." She was quiet a moment, and then a tired man with grease under his nails taught me the secret none of them ever learned. You do not have to break the door, Bram. You do not have to be the strongest thing in the room. You only have to care enough to look closely and be patient enough to stay. Bram Holloway looked at his wife, at the disowned princess turned second-class mechanic, at the woman who had come out of a box and pried open a sealed-up man and never once asked him to be anything other than exactly what he was. "That's the whole trade," he said softly. "That's the only thing I know." "I know," said Alara. "It is everything." And somewhere in a tool bag, wedged between a hydro wrench and an ancient scanner, a blue and yellow can of WD-40 waited patient and faded and ready for the next impossible thing that would turn out in the end to be simple. Because most of them are. Because sometimes a door is just a door, and sometimes the person. The whole galaxy overlooked the quiet one, the tired one. The one with grease under their nails and a small life and a stubborn, unreasonable heart is exactly the person who can look at the thing everyone else called hopeless and see instead the thing that only needs a little care and someone willing to stay.